The outer sectors of the Galactic Concord were calm, or at least they had been for as long as anyone could remember. Trade routes hummed with transports, patrol vessels moved in predictable patterns, and the Council's fleets believed they had mastered the art of deterrence. For centuries, the Concord had grown accustomed to peace secured by sheer strength. Their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, their influence stretched across 1,000 worlds, and their arrogance reached even further. Nothing truly threatened them anymore. That belief ended the moment a fleet unlike any other appeared. It arrived without ceremony, without the familiar resonance of Concord drives, without even the warning of long-range sensors. One instant, the stars beyond the border system of Eridanus shone undisturbed, and the next, a dozen human ships floated in silent formation, engines burning with a pale blue flame that seemed both beautiful and menacing. At first, the border garrisons assumed it was some navigational mishap, perhaps a lost convoy or a minor exploratory flotilla. But then they looked closer. These were not trading vessels. These were not surveyors. They were warships, each of them heavy-framed, armored in black plating that reflected no light, their hulls bristling with weapon ports unfamiliar to Concord design. Most unsettling of all was the silence. Every known species announced themselves when entering another's territory. Some demanded recognition with elaborate codes, others sent greetings or warnings. The humans did nothing. No signals, no demands, no negotiations. They simply held position, their fleet arrayed in a straight line that looked less like a formation and more like a wall. The local commander dispatched a message to Central Command, uncertain how to classify the intruders. The response came quickly. A diplomatic escort was to be sent. A gesture of strength but not aggression. 4 frigates, sleek and well-armed, approached the human fleet at cautious speed. Their comms officers sent the standard greeting in a dozen Concord languages. No reply. They transmitted again, more firmly. Still nothing. Moments later, every sensor in the system spiked. The frigate's shields flared, alarms rang, and then silence again. The fleet on the border watched in horror as the escorts simply ceased to exist. Shards of hull metal tumbled across the void, cooling in the dim light of the local sun. The human fleet had fired, but no one saw the attack. 1 second, the frigates were whole. The next, they were debris. The survivors on the listening posts sat frozen. A fleet that could erase ships with such speed, such precision, had not even moved after its strike. The humans had not advanced, not pursued. They simply returned to stillness, their engines humming with quiet defiance. News of the incident reached the Council within hours. Reactions were divided. Some dismissed it as an unfortunate misunderstanding, an accident of miscommunication. Others whispered that the humans had demonstrated power far beyond what any backwater world should possess. A few of the oldest strategists leaned back in their chairs, eyes heavy with memory, and muttered that this was no accident at all. Across the Concord, whispers spread faster than official reports. Merchants spoke of shadow fleets, of humans who had appeared and vanished near remote systems before. Soldiers remembered rumors of expeditions that never returned. Now, with one border fleet erased in seconds, those rumors felt all too real. But the most unnerving fact was not the destruction of 4 ships. It was the waiting. The human fleet did not push forward into Concord territory. They did not seize a planet or demand a tribute. They simply stood there, a wall of steel and silence, as if daring the galaxy to come closer. In the silence of the Eridanus system, the stars seemed to hold their breath. And for the first time in living memory, the great Galactic Concord hesitated. The Concord Council met in urgent session beneath the vaulted chambers of the central hall. Holograms of a dozen species flickered across the circular chamber, their voices overlapping in tones of fear, anger, and doubt. The incident at Eridanus could not be ignored. A foreign fleet had entered their space, ignored their warnings, and erased 4 frigates in the blink of an eye. To some counselors, it was an intolerable insult. To others, it was a mystery best left unsolved. The Speaker of the Council struck the platform to silence the chamber. We cannot appear weak. A single fleet cannot be allowed to challenge the Concord. And so, a decision was made. A larger detachment would be dispatched, not to negotiate, not to destroy, but to test. The humans had displayed unexpected strength. Yes, but surely it was limited. The Concord had fought wars against far greater powers. They had crushed empires, pacified rebellions, and absorbed entire civilizations into their fold. One fleet, however strange, could not shake their dominance. The test force was assembled within a day. 12 cruisers, escorted by destroyers and fast attack corvettes, translated into Eridanus space with the full authority of the Concord behind them. Their admiral was confident, his voice calm as he addressed his crews. They may have destroyed 4 frigates. Let us see how they fare against a true fleet. Across the system, the human ships did not move. The Concord force advanced slowly, spreading wide to flank the line of alien vessels. Sensors probed for weaknesses. Weapons systems charged. The humans did nothing. Their ships floated in the same rigid wall, engines glowing, weapons silent. Then, as the admiral gave the order to advance to weapons range, the humans acted. There was no flash of energy, no storm of missiles, no dramatic duel of starships exchanging fire. Instead, one by one, Concord ships began to vanish from sensors. Entire cruisers lost power in seconds, their shields collapsing as if some invisible hand had stripped them away. Corvettes spun out of control, their drives burning out. Destroyers cracked apart, their hulls splitting with surgical precision. Within moments, half the Concord test fleet was gone. The other half scattered, confusion spreading faster than orders. They tried to retreat, but their jump drives failed. They attempted to regroup, but their comms were jammed by signals they couldn't even detect. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The humans did not pursue. They did not finish the battle. They allowed the survivors to limp away, carrying the memory of what had happened. Their line reformed, perfectly still once again, as though nothing had occurred. When the battered remnants of the test fleet returned to Concord space, panic spread. These were not inexperienced cadets. They had been veterans, well-trained and well-armed, yet they had been dismantled as if they were toys in the hands of something far greater. The council demanded explanations. Military analysts pored over sensor logs, only to discover gaps and anomalies that made no sense. It was as if the humans' weapons existed outside known physics, bypassing shields and armor alike. Even the best scientific minds admitted they had no clear understanding of what had occurred, and that uncertainty was worse than defeat. Whispers turned to fear. Was this the limit of human power, or just the beginning? Were these ships prototypes, or merely the vanguard of something larger? And why above all, had the humans not pressed their advantage? If they had conquered the system, the Concord might have understood. If they had demanded tribute, it would have fit their expectations. But the humans did none of that. They destroyed when provoked, and then returned to silence, like guardians standing watch over an unseen frontier. In the homes and marketplaces of 100 worlds, the people began to talk. Fear spread faster than orders from the council. The image of the human fleet, waiting in perfect silence beyond Eridanus, began to haunt every conversation. For the first time in centuries, the Concord's citizens asked a question their leaders could not answer. What if this is not their only fleet? And deep in the darkness beyond the stars, the human warships waited, cold, silent, and unyielding. The great hall of the Concord Council was not accustomed to silence, but on this day it weighed heavily over every delegate. The defeat of the test fleet had shaken even the most confident voices. 12 cruisers and their escorts had been dismantled. In less than 10 minutes, and the survivors had returned with reports that contradicted every rule of known warfare. The speaker called the session to order, but the usual confidence was gone from their voice. "We are faced with a threat that cannot be ignored. The humans, whatever they are, have displayed capabilities beyond anything we understand. We must decide now whether they are an enemy to be destroyed or a power to be respected." Chamber erupted in competing voices. The militant species demanded immediate retaliation. To them, the humiliation of 2 defeats in a row was intolerable. They argued that assembling a grand fleet, one large enough to overwhelm the humans through sheer numbers, was the only solution. Others, however, counseled caution. They pointed out that humanity had not advanced, had not seized worlds, and had made no demands. "They wait," one diplomat said with unease, "and waiting is always more dangerous than striking. What are they waiting for?" Intelligence divisions scrambled to provide answers. Teams dug into the archives, searching for overlooked mentions of Earth. What they found only deepened the unease. The earliest records of contact with the Sol system were vague and inconclusive. Survey ships had entered the region centuries earlier, but their reports were thin and contradictory. Some mentioned strange interference with sensors, others spoke of energy readings that did not match any known signatures. Several expeditions had gone missing entirely, marked down in history as navigation failures or piracy. Yet now, with the knowledge of the Eridanus incident, those old entries no longer seemed like chance. Whispers grew louder. Had the Concord been blind to humanity all along? Had they dismissed a world that was never weak in the first place? In military circles, the questions grew more urgent. Fleet commanders debated tactics. Could the humans be countered with overwhelming firepower? Could numbers alone solve the mystery of their weapons? Or would sending more ships only provide the humans with more victories? While the council debated, news of the defeats spread across the population. On distant colonies, merchants passed rumors that the humans had technology stolen from ancient precursors. Soldiers told hushed tales of human warriors who had once fought entire empires into ruin. Families wondered if the Concord's fleets, which had always seemed so invincible, could truly protect them if the humans decided to advance. The most troubling part for everyone, leaders and citizens alike, was that the humans had shown no interest in conquest. Conquerors were predictable. They wanted territory, resources, tribute. These silent fleets wanted none of it. They waited like watchmen at a gate, defending something unseen. A senior strategist finally voiced what many were beginning to suspect. What if this is not their home? What if this is not even their strength? What if this is only a fragment, a single fleet sent to remind us that they exist? The suggestion chilled the chamber. If the dozen ships at Eridanus were only one formation among many, then what was hidden within the Sol system? Still, the debate circled endlessly. Attack or negotiate? Fear or dismiss? Days turned into weeks, and still the humans did not move. Their silent vigil continued, their ships untouched by time or pressure. In the quiet hours of the night, when counselors sat alone in their chambers, many found themselves staring at star maps. They traced the route from Eridanus back toward Earth, a small and long overlooked system, and for the first time in centuries they felt uncertainty. The galaxy had always belonged to the Concord, its fleets unmatched, its rule unquestioned. But now a shadow stretched from that ignored corner of space, and it was a shadow cast by humanity. And in that silence, fear began to bloom in the halls of power. For weeks, the human fleet lingered on the edge of Eridanus, silent and unmoving. It became more than a standoff. It became a presence, a shadow over every decision the Concord made. Traders diverted their routes to avoid the system. Civilian chatter filled the networks with speculation. Some feared the humans were waiting for reinforcements. Others believed they were already preparing a strike. Yet no attack came, no envoy arrived, and the line of Terran warships remained fixed in the void. At last, the Council reached its limit. A third fleet, larger than the last two combined, was assembled. 300 ships, a symbol of raw concord might, gathered at Eridanus to bring the matter to a close. The admiral chosen for the operation was a veteran who had led campaigns across 2 sectors. His confidence was unshaken by rumors. "Warships are warships," he told his staff. "They may be unusual, but they are not invincible. This time, we will remind them of that truth." The formation entered the system in perfect order. Waves of destroyers spread ahead, cruisers forming a spearhead, dreadnoughts anchoring the Yi line. The display was one of discipline and dominance, a force designed to show that the Concord's strength remained unchallenged. For long minutes, nothing changed. The human fleet still hung silent, arrayed in its eerie straight line. The Admiral ordered a broadcast. His voice carried on every frequency. "This is the Galactic Concord. You will power down your weapons and engines and surrender your vessels. If you comply, you will not be harmed." The human ships did not respond. The Admiral tried again, sharper this time, demanding recognition. Still silence. Officers glanced at one another, their unease growing. The humans had ignored every message before, but now, with such overwhelming force gathered, their refusal carried a new kind of weight. And then, without warning, every channel across the system opened. A single voice spoke, calm and measured. The language was translated automatically into every tongue of the Concord, clear and unmistakable. "This is the first fleet of Earth. Do not advance further." The words were few, no threats, no explanations. Just a warning delivered with absolute certainty. For a moment, silence reigned across the comms. Crews on Concord ships stared at their consoles, stunned. The Admiral clenched his jaw, unwilling to yield. To back down now would shatter the Council's authority. He gave the order to attack. The first wave of destroyers surged forward, weapons firing. Beams of plasma and arcs of energy lashed across the void, lighting the system with the fury of a storm. Explosions rippled where their fire struck, but none touched the Terran line. The humans moved at last, their ships shifting with precision. Returning fire in patterns the Concord could not anticipate. The results were devastating. Concord ships disintegrated under weapons that pierced shields as though they were air. Dreadnoughts, built to withstand sieges, broke apart in moments. Squadrons tried to retreat, only to be cut down with surgical efficiency. The battle was not a contest, it was an execution. Within minutes, half the 300-ship armada was gone. The rest scattered in panic, formations broken, commanders shouting contradictory orders. Only a handful of vessels managed to flee the system, their drives burning at maximum to escape the slaughter. The human fleet did not chase them. Once again, they returned to their rigid line, silent save for the echo of their single message. The survivors carried the tale back to the core worlds. For the first time in centuries, the Concord tasted something it had forgotten long ago: fear of annihilation. Citizens filled the streets with questions the Council could not answer. Armies of analysts dissected every scrap of sensor data, desperate for an explanation that never came. And still, the humans remained silent. They had spoken once with their warning, and then with fire. Across the galaxy, the image of the Terran fleet burned itself into memory. The message echoed through every world and every council chamber. "This is the first fleet of Earth. Do not advance further." The defeat at Eridanus rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. 300 ships had entered battle with confidence, and within minutes, half of them had been erased as though they were nothing more than dust in the stars. Survivors spoke, in hushed, trembling voices of weapons that tore through shields like mist, and of maneuvers so precise they seemed less like combat and more like execution. The Concord Council met again, but this time the chamber felt different. Gone was the arrogance that had once filled the hall. Fear lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. Some leaders demanded immediate retaliation. They have challenged our sovereignty. If we do not respond with overwhelming force, then the galaxy will see weakness. They proposed the mobilization of every available fleet. A war on a scale not seen in centuries. Others resisted, their voices rising with desperation. You saw what happened. Numbers will not save us. Every time we engage, they destroy us without effort. How many fleets will we lose before we understand? These humans are not like our enemies of the past. They are something else. The arguments grew louder, more frantic. The once united Concord fractured into factions. Some worlds believed humanity must be crushed before they spread further. Others whispered that perhaps humanity was not an enemy at all, but a potential shield against threats yet unseen. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens grew restless. On the streets of the core worlds, people whispered of ancient myths, legends of lost civilizations, and mysterious guardians at the edge of known space. Rumors painted the humans not as conquerors, but as watchers, waiting until the galaxy grew reckless enough to be reminded of its limits. Markets trembled. Trade convoys rerouted in fear. Merchants demanded new escorts, and insurance rates skyrocketed. The image of the silent human fleet at Eridanus haunted everyone. Parents told their children to pray the humans would never march deeper into the stars. Soldiers who had once boasted of the Concord's invincibility now sat in silence, staring at maps with unease. In military headquarters, debates grew heated. Some admirals still clung to the belief that brute force could prevail. If one armada fails, then send 10. If 10 fail, then send 20. No power in history has withstood the Concord's full might. But others saw the truth. The humans had not been fighting to win territory. They had not demanded concessions or spoils. Their fleets did not behave like aggressors. Instead, they behaved like guardians, defending a line no one else could see. That restraint was more frightening than aggression. Aggressors had motives. Guardians had patience. The most unnerving question spread through both military and civilian circles alike. Why had they not advanced? If the humans could destroy 300 ships with such ease, why had they stopped there? Why did they not seize Eridanus or press further into Concord space? What held them back? As these questions festered, alliances within the Council began to shift. A growing number of species demanded secret negotiations. They wanted to reach out to Earth directly, bypassing the Council's pride and bluster, to secure peace or even alliance. To them, siding with humanity seemed safer than resisting them. Others considered such thoughts betrayal. Heated accusations filled the chambers. You would kneel to them? You would invite them into our councils? But behind the anger was fear. Every counselor, no matter their stance, remembered the human voice that had echoed across the stars. It had been calm, steady, and utterly certain. This is the first fleet of Earth. Do not advance further. If this was only the first fleet, then how many more existed? That question alone tore at the fabric of the Concord. Leaders who had once stood side by side now eyed one another with suspicion. The unity that had bound the galaxy for centuries was beginning to crack. And in the silence beyond Eridanus, the humans waited, offering no answers, giving no explanations. The Concord had faced enemies before. They had crushed empires and quelled rebellions. But they had never faced an opponent who frightened them, more by standing still than by advancing, and with each passing day of silence, the fear grew. The Concord could no longer sit idle. Silence from the humans was unbearable. more suffocating than open war. Every day their fleet lingered in Eridanus was another day of uncertainty, and uncertainty was poison to the Council's authority. To restore confidence, they resolved to send scouts. If the humans would not explain themselves, then the Concord would uncover the truth. A handful of fast, stealth-equipped vessels were chosen for the mission. Their orders were simple: penetrate the Sol system, gather intelligence, and return. If humanity had hidden resources, the Council wanted proof. If Earth was weak, the Council needed to know. The scouts departed quietly, their launch unannounced. To the public, their destination known only to a select few in the highest circles of power. The first reports arrived weeks later, and they were unsettling. A scout that approached the edge of the Sol system reported interference unlike anything its crew had encountered. Long-range sensors distorted, readings scrambled, navigation systems overwhelmed by static that appeared and disappeared without pattern. It was as though the system itself resisted being observed. Then the transmissions stopped. No wreckage, no distress calls, just silence. Another scout pressed deeper. This one managed to send fragments of data before vanishing. What little information made it back caused confusion in the Council's intelligence divisions. The ship's crew described vast orbital structures around Earth and Mars, shipyards larger than entire moons, glowing with activity. Countless vessels were under construction, more than the Concord had believed possible for a single world. Energy outputs from those yards exceeded what should have been possible for the industrial base of one system. The scout never returned. A third vessel reached Jupiter and transmitted images that shocked even the most skeptical. Entire fleets of ships floated in orderly patterns, silent and patient, like blades kept in reserve. Thousands of hulls, each as formidable as those at Eridanus, waited in the shadow of the gas giant. The scout sent a final burst of images before it, too, disappeared. The council chambers erupted in panic when these fragments were revealed. Humanity had not sent their full force to Eridanus. They had sent a single fleet, one among many. If Jupiter alone sheltered thousands of warships, how many more slept in the other reaches of Sol? Speculation ran wild. Some argued that humans must have discovered ancient technology, relics from a forgotten age. Others suggested their science had advanced in secret, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy. But no one could deny the scale. Earth was not a backwater world. It was a fortress. Citizens learned of the leaked images within days. Markets plunged. Protests erupted on core worlds as people demanded answers. "How did the council not know?" they cried. "How could a civilization of such power be ignored until now?" For the military, the implications were staggering. The Concord's fleets, mighty though they were, suddenly seemed fragile. If the humans chose to march, they could overwhelm sector after sector. No strategy, no number of ships could guarantee survival. Yet still, the humans did not advance. Their first fleet remained at Eridanus, silent as ever. Their others, glimpsed in the shadows of Sol, stayed hidden from the galaxy. The message they had sent echoed louder with each passing day. Do not advance further. This restraint gnawed at the minds of leaders. Why show such overwhelming power only to hold it back? Why reveal enough to terrify the galaxy, but not enough to explain themselves? Were the humans defending something, or were they simply waiting? In private, more counselors began to question whether resistance was even possible. A handful suggested negotiation, even alliance. Others recoiled at the thought, calling it surrender without battle. The fractures in the Concord deepened further, and trust among its members withered. Meanwhile, the people of Earth remained unseen. Their fleets spoke for them. Their silence was louder than speeches, their patience more frightening than war, and somewhere in the depths of the Sol system, under the shadows of steel shipyards and endless fleets, humanity prepared, not for conquest, but for the day they would need to remind the galaxy again of who they were. The Concord's fear grew unbearable. Weeks of debate and panic had produced nothing but division. Some species demanded negotiation, others demanded war, but none could escape the dread that hung over them. Every star map reminded them that Eridanus was not far from the core trade lanes. Every whisper about Sol's hidden strength turned into rumor and paranoia. The once mighty alliance was beginning to crumble under its own uncertainty. At last, the Council resolved to act. Pride, fear, and desperation merged into one decision: a full-scale strike. The largest fleet ever assembled in living memory was called to arms. Thousands of ships from across the Concord gathered, their hulls filling the void like a swarm of fireflies. Admirals promised their people that this would be decisive, that humanity's mystery would end, and that the Concord's supremacy would be restored. The Armada moved toward Eridanus with unstoppable momentum, its commanders certain that sheer weight of numbers would crush whatever tricks the humans had hidden. This time, they told themselves, humanity would not be facing a probing force or a mere show of strength. This was the combined will of the galaxy. When the Armada entered the system, the human First Fleet was still there. A dozen warships, unmoving, silent, their formation unbroken. Against the backdrop of thousands, the Terran ships seemed impossibly small, like a fragile wall daring to hold back a tidal wave. The Concord hailed them, broadcasting across every channel. There was no response. The Admiral of the Armada gave the order to advance, and then space itself seemed to shudder. From the edge of the system, new signatures erupted. One formation after another poured into real space, vast walls of steel and fire. First, a second fleet appeared, then a third, then a fourth. Each was identical to the first, precise, disciplined, terrifyingly silent. They arrived in unison, taking position alongside their brethren, their engines glowing the same cold blue flame. By the time the final arrivals settled into formation, the galaxy's greatest armada was staring at not one, but 11 Terran fleets. The silence that followed was absolute. Crews aboard conquered ships stared at their displays in disbelief. Officers whispered in shock. Admirals fell into stunned quiet as the scale of it became clear. Humanity had not brought reinforcements. They had revealed their hand. 10 more fleets, stretched across the system, each as powerful as the one that had shattered Concord forces before. Together they formed a wall so vast that it eclipsed the very stars, a barrier of steel and resolve that dared the galaxy to move closer. The humans transmitted once more. The same voice, calm and steady, filled every channel. This is Earth. You were warned. Do not advance further. The effect was immediate. Entire squadrons of Concord ships broke formation in panic, scattering like leaves before a storm. Captains abandoned orders, retreating blindly into hyperspace. Even admirals, hardened by centuries of campaigns, could feel the weight of inevitability pressing down on them. The Concord Armada had come to prove its dominance, but instead it had been unmade by the sight of Terran patience and preparation. For every ship the Council had scraped together, Earth had an answer, 11 times over. The retreat was chaotic. Hyperlanes clogged with fleeing vessels, discipline collapsed, and what had once been a show of unity dissolved into frightened flight. Entire species withdrew their fleets, unwilling to sacrifice more lives to a cause that no longer felt just or winnable. When the dust settled, only one truth remained clear across the stars. The Concord's reign of unquestioned dominance was over. Humanity had stepped from the shadows, not as conquerors, but as a force the galaxy could neither ignore nor challenge. In the silence that followed, one phrase spread from world to world, whispered in awe and fear alike. One fleet shook, them with fear. Then Earth released 10 more. The Concord's retreat left the Eridanus system eerily quiet, 11 Terran fleets held their positions in unbroken silence, like statues carved from the void. The galaxy's greatest armada had come to test Earth's resolve, and it had shattered without a single shot fired. For the first time in living memory, the Concord's supremacy was gone. Its leaders no longer spoke with certainty. Its member species no longer trusted in its protection. Fear had broken. The bonds of alliance and doubt spread faster than any fleet. On Earth, however, there was no celebration. Within the command halls, buried beneath the planet's surface, humanity's leaders watched the fractured retreat of the Concorde with grim faces. They had not built these fleets for conquest. They had built them because of memory. Humanity remembered what others had forgotten. Ancient records spoke of civilizations that had once stretched across the stars, mighty empires that vanished into ruin. Humanity had studied their remnants, learned from their failures. They knew what unchecked power could do, and they knew what waited in the dark between galaxies. Earth's fleets were not weapons of ambition. They were shields against what might return. The decision was made not to pursue the retreating armada. No human ship crossed the border into conquered space. No world was seized. The fleets remained in place, silent sentinels that made their intentions clear. Humanity would defend, but it would not invade. That restraint sent ripples across the galaxy. Rumors spread that Earth sought no empire, that their silence was not arrogance but purpose. The Concorde, still trembling from its humiliation, struggled to understand. Why build such fleets if not to rule? Why reveal such strength only to remain still? Some began to see the truth. Merchants whispered that humanity was a wall against something worse. Soldiers speculated that the Terrans prepared for a war beyond the borders of known space. On remote colonies, where fear of invasion had taken root, relief began to grow. If Earth was not an enemy, perhaps it was a guardian. Inside the council chambers, debates raged. The most prideful demanded revenge, but their voices were weaker, now drowned out by the memory of 11 Terran fleets. Others argued for diplomacy, for the first time admitting that coexistence might be possible. A few even suggested alliance, though such words were spoken carefully for fear of backlash. The galaxy's people, however, were quicker to decide. They had seen what happened when the Concorde's arrogance met Terran patience. They had watched entire armadas scatter without a single Terran shot fired. To them, Earth was not a rival. Earth was a truth, a power that could not be ignored, but one that did not seek conquest. And so the legend began to take root. Across starports and mining colonies, across academies and marketplaces, a phrase spread like wildfire. The fleets of Earth wait not to rule, but to guard. Generations would repeat it, uncertain of its origin, but the meaning would remain clear. Humanity had chosen its role, not emperor, not conqueror, guardian. For the Terrans themselves, the choice was both a burden and a vow. Their fleets remained. At Eridanus, silent and unmoving, a constant reminder that humanity watched. In the Sol system, shipyards continued to turn, building not out of greed, but out of necessity. Every hull was another promise that when danger came, whether from within, the galaxy or beyond it, Earth would be ready. The Concorde, fractured and humbled, faced a choice of its own. It could cling to its old pride and risk annihilation, or it could reshape itself in the shadow of Earth's fleets. Slowly, reluctantly, it began to change. Diplomats spoke with caution. Fleets were recalled from aggressive borders. The galaxy learned to live under the quiet gaze of humanity, and though the Terrans never declared war, never claimed new worlds, their silence was enough. Their patience was enough. Their presence was enough. One fleet had shaken the galaxy with fear. 11 more had shown the truth. Humanity had not risen to rule, but to stand watch. And in that choice, the stars themselves seemed just a little less dark.